Welcome to Self Perfected.
Okay, hang on. Wait, still going live
Hello,
on
everybody.
Facebook.
We're just gonna pretend like we're live for a few
Alright.
minutes, for a second here, and then we're just gonna go. So, welcome. This is the most censored podcast on the internet. We did the metrics. We did all the research. No one's more censored than us. No one's spilling more truth beans than us.
Mm,
I'm just talking while Drake figures that out. So, anyways, we'll just move along.
we're
How was
good.
y'all's weekend? Oh, and now we're live. Okay, now we're live on Facebook.
There we
All
go.
right, there we go.
There
We
we
have
go.
we have to go live on Facebook because here's what I saw today. Right, you just sent me something about Bolsonaro. Actually, it wasn't Bolsonaro. Bolsonaro got kicked out of Brazil. But
There's that Lula guy.
yeah, Lula.
Is he sponsored by like Lululemon?
Lululemon. He just changed his name. Remember when Meta World Peace, when Ron Artest changed his name to Meta World Peace?
Just like that.
That's what this guy did. He got sponsored by Lululemon. He's like, my name is now Lula. You can only refer to me as Lula.
He just wears
You can just
jogging,
buy
like,
politicians
yoga pants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but the point that I wanted to make with that is I was looking at it and going, man, I really want to talk about this, but we've already been censored on YouTube twice now, and had videos taken down. And I know if we get another strike, it'll be a month before we can upload to YouTube. Then I was like, you know what? Fuck it. Because we're not doing this for YouTube. We're not doing this like
we're not saying anything that's not true.
Right. And the way that the way that censorship works is to get you to censor yourself, and then you're changing your behaviors, and then you're automatically doing the thing that you're like, I'm trying to stand up against this thing, but very quietly, like, it's like, what's the point then? And so we're not doing this for YouTube or to be on YouTube. We don't give a fuck about that, actually.
Yeah.
Like, we're doing this to share with our community, to share with all of you guys who can hear and everything. Like, hey, this is the information that you need to be aware of, as far as Cam, you're gonna love this. I've been reading this
love it.
Okay, good. See, I knew it. I've been reading this book. I forgot what it's called, but it has something to do with sticky notes. But anyway, the book is so good because there's something in there at the very beginning, and it talks about this concept of commander's intent, right? Have you heard of this concept before? Commander's intent? Okay, beautiful concept. It's basically this. If you're trying to get out an idea, if you give a whole bunch of information, obviously people are going to be like glazed over. I didn't understand any of this, because people have low vocabulary, right? And so what it says is, in order to get an idea to stick, or in order to get out the information out viral, you got to have what's called commander's intent, which is what they use in the military for, like a general is not going to be like, or the president in chief is going to be like, okay, I want you to go in there and I want you to kill all these guys, but make sure that you go in from the south side and all that. It's like, you can't predict all of that stuff.
Are you talking about Chicago just now?
I was, actually.
Okay. That's like literally Obama when he was in Chicago. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. But you can't map out every single detail. You've heard the phrase of like, everyone has a good plan until they get punched in the face, right? And so it's the same thing. It's like you wouldn't be able, like, the way it was. There was an analogy of like, you can't play chess through another person. Meaning you can't map out every single move for someone to do and say, okay, do all these moves when you go play chess, because as soon as they start, the opponent might do a completely different move than what you predicted, and you don't have something mapped out for that. It's like, okay, well, what's the intent here? What is the major goal of what we're trying to accomplish? And with that, then they're able to make their own decisions within it, and make sure that the intent is accomplished, but also, that they're able to improvise, right? And be.
It's better for everyone to have that intention. I know we're using that word loosely, but like to have that as the driving point than some specific step-by-step detailed plan. Because like you said, then you can't improvise, and then
it's the same thing. It's the same thing Bernard talks about of a world that's best transcends good and evil, right? Because you can have all these morality points of, oh, you should never do this and you should always do that or whatever. But like when the context comes in of what's actually happening, it's like, oh, you should never curse. Really? Like, is that really that important? Like, do we have to live in this rigid way, or is there the ability to look at the full context of what's going on and go, okay, this is necessary in this moment, and this is what we have to do in order to create the best outcome for everybody.
It's like the old phrase that we use often, which is be firm in your principles and flexible in your expression.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah, with the morality point too, it's like when people hear that, they'll automatically go into a morality point and be like, oh, so it's okay to kill people, it's okay to do this or that. And it's like, there's certain things that are not acceptable, but you can
Right.
work that out based on common sense. So that's not morality. Morality is always actually shifting. Because I mean, you know, I heard this cool thing. I forget what it was from, but maybe it was like Timcast or something like that. But they were talking about, they were talking about the point about the current, you know, generations of people who are, you know, all into the pro-trans, all this stuff, and like the Antifa types, that kind of thing, right? And how, you know, remember during Trump, it was all about like beating up Nazis and all this kind of stuff, right? And it was like identifying with this idea from World War II of like you're fighting the Nazis, you know, that kind of thing.
Right.
And he was talking about how like if the people from that generation like were here now, like in their cultural context and everything, but like with the Antifa people, he was like saying like they weren't down with like transgender, they weren't down with LGBT, they weren't down with any of that stuff. I mean, you know, the civil rights thing was still building, you know what I mean? So how much of Antifa would actually agree with that? So but they were fighting the Nazis for real.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? So there's this cognitive dissonance. So my point just being that the morality is always shifting in the sense of like, you know, if you question all the LGBT stuff, you know, the promotion of that to children, and let's just say, then suddenly you're a bad person, you're insensitive, but that wouldn't have been bad before, and now it is, and then that'll change eventually, and it'll be something else, and then so that the morality point is just, that's why it's all based on an authority, and that's the difference. So people, again, they think, oh, so if you don't have morality, you'll just do anything. And it's like, well, let's just look at it for a moment. The most moral, the places that have the highest authoritative moral points do like the worst shit. Do you know what I mean? Like like the Catholic Church or any church, or like empires, like religious empires and all kinds of stuff. There's all kinds of abuse that occurs. So the idea that some code of morality is what keeps you in check is not the case, because that doesn't happen anywhere in the world. It's just, okay, you have morality, but look at the actual result of it. Does it actually produce a world that's best? It doesn't. It just keeps the world as it is. So transcending that doesn't mean, it means going beyond. It doesn't mean going backward. It doesn't mean having no morality, or it doesn't mean having no standards of what's acceptable and what's not. It means basing them on, instead of an authority, you know, like you can't eat pork on Wednesdays unless you've washed your face 3 times and then stood up and down, you know, you're like, but that was just something that like maybe in some historical context, maybe it made sense or something because of some whatever reason,
Right.
you know, like, you know, it's interesting too. Like I was sending you guys pictures from yesterday. We had this guy come over who showed us how to slaughter a pig. Like we have pigs, and he showed us how to slaughter them and like butcher them. And we did the whole process. And now we've got this freezer full of like meat, you know, from just one little, it wasn't even a big pig, like, because the breed we have is not
Wow.
huge, but it was like, I mean, we have pork chops, you know, bacon, like all this like stuff that can be rendered into lard. We have, so it's like, we won't even need to buy like oils and butter and stuff, you know.
Did you find the Canadian bacon cut?
No, like
Just
these pigs that
kidding.
we have, and see, I'll kind of get to the point in a second, but like, they're super fatty, like these types of pigs, and apparently that's what they're raised for. Because like when we got them, we didn't know anything about anything. It's just like kind of what's promoted, and it was a really cool lesson. Like it wasn't like bad. It's just actually, it was actually good because Katie wanted to have a bunch of lard and stuff like that. right? So it was actually good that they are more fatty because we don't eat a lot of pork, right?
Yeah.
And it's not that we do eat bacon, right? But only again on Wednesdays after we've done our ablutions, right? But it was cool because like with talking with this guy, he basically has like a small business where he goes around and like the other day he did a buffalo for somebody. He like goes to their place. He doesn't just do everything for them. He like shows you how to
How do you
do
kill
it.
a buffalo?
How do you kill it?
Yeah.
There
if
are
you're
many
preparing a
ways.
buffalo.
Many ways.
Well, you start
you
with
string it
westward
up?
expansion, okay, and then over time you start
Guns,
taking their
germs, and
land.
steel.
Yeah, I'm sure it's very. I actually don't know, but
Probably
so this
with
guy.
that cattle.
Yeah, I don't know. Like there's different ways of doing it. And probably I would assume
Lobotomy.
you'd have to have like a high powered, like high caliber gun. But that apparently doesn't kill them. So like when you do it, like you actually, it's very similar to like when you kill a turkey or a chicken. What actually kills them is them like losing all their blood. Right. So with a pig, for example, if you shoot it in the head, it just kind of stuns it. I'm not saying it would never die, but that in itself is not enough. You need to like cut them in a way where they lose all their blood, and that's how they die.
I experienced that firsthand.
Yeah, with what?
Pigs
When?
Piglet.
Oh, pigs.
at your place.
Oh yeah.
Oh, different
Yeah,
time.
exactly. See, but now I know.
Yeah,
Right? I didn't know that then either. But anyway, so it was cool talking to the guy because I was asking him a lot of questions, because he's there and I could ask him anything I wanted. And asking him a question like, well, how much should we feed them or this or that or whatever? And he's like, well, I'm looking at your grass and you only have 2 types of grass, and where they're at, they don't have X, Y, and Z. And he's like, where I live, we've got all these different things and they can eat legumes and stuff like that. And he said, so it's not like you could just take what I'm doing and just copy it.
Oh,
Right. And he said, so right. So it doesn't mean that what he's doing is the per se only way to do it. It's like there's a best way depending on what you have available.
yeah.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so also he has different pigs.
Okay,
Right.
yeah.
And so, but the reason I was bringing it up too is because like, why did we know about these particular types of pigs? Because when Katie's like on the internet researching and stuff, that's what people are talking about. There's YouTube videos, all that kind of stuff. But it was like they became popular in some way. And then he was like saying like, yeah, I've seen those particular types of pigs become popular. Eventually the bottom will drop out of that and then it'll be something else. Right. And it doesn't mean it's bad to have them or anything. He was just explaining how, it's not, I'm trying to think of why I specifically brought that up. It's kind of like, it's just, you can see how certain things are promoted and you get into something and you don't necessarily know everything about it. And so when I'm just looking at how that ties back to the morality point. It's like, there's context to things, right? But then people try to take it and they try to copy it and they try to you try to put all these rules, but you don't really understand. And so I was like, talking to him, I'm like, yeah, I can see how somebody could just take something and try to copy it, but they're not taking full responsibility within it. So they don't really know what they're doing. And then it's ended up not being best.
Yeah.
So they really need support. You need that support, right, within the point. So it was really cool to have that. And
it kind of reminds me of like there was this book by it's a pen name, but the guy's name was like Don Juan or Carlos Castaneda, something like that.
Yeah.
And it was like basically telling the story of becoming an apprentice, like coming from the Western world and then becoming an apprentice of a shaman. And like there was just a lot of like these shamanic kind of principles that don't make sense in any other context, but like
Right.
trying to extract that and bring it into the Western world, that sort of thing.
Yeah. I read some of those books. That was a really interesting. I mean, he's got a bunch of books, but I forget what it was called, but the one I read was about. I only remember 2 points about it. I remember him going, and there was this woman who had made this tiled floor. Did you read this one? It was
I
like
don't know.
this like really intricate tiled floor, and she had done it. And so like when he comes in the door, there was like this magic to the tile because of her intention and what she put into it, and it like trapped the guy.
Oh,
And it was like she was like a witch or something.
Oh,
I remember
yeah,
that.
yeah.
It was really like trying to process that point. And the other thing I remember was like some mescaline or whatever peyote trip he did
That's-
when he was
that's
like
what I
going into other
remember.
dimensions and shit, and that was just like insane.
Yeah, that's what I
Um,
remember.
But yeah, so I'm sure a lot of people read that stuff and just wanted to do drugs, basically.
Yeah,
You know what I
yeah.
mean? Yeah. Which is like
Pretty-
totally missing the point of if there is any value of the shamanic thing. Of
That's
like,
why Drake went to Argentina.
No,
But that-
okay, that is not.
but that actually is a really good example of
Isn't
it.
it that in a different form though? Like
What's
the
that?
chef, right? He's like entertaining people, you know, with his chef skills. It's kind of like the shaman.
Yeah, I suppose you could say that. Like there's definitely like, okay. Part of the reason why I went to Argentina actually does relate to it a little bit in the sense that this guy is going to learn from a shaman, and he wants to like be like this guy. Like he wants to have sort of the respect that he has for this guy. He wants that for himself. He wants like for himself to be special in a way, like this guy, right? And it's the same thing that I was experiencing when I saw this chef. There was something about like the way he lived his lifestyle. Like, even though, okay, you guys know me, like from Self Perfected and all this, right? This was before Self Perfected. This guy had multiple children from multiple women, right? Like he had older kids, and then he just had this young child who was from a woman that he wasn't even married to. And like the way that he lived his lifestyle was he was seeing multiple women, and he would hang out with this one woman who had his child for like 2 weeks at a time, and then he'd be gone for 2 weeks at a time with somebody else living in his own house. And like that's
And now that has become morally acceptable,
right,
because
And-
that's always been here. You know, like there's always been men who do that, and that's, you know, thing. But now it's like pushed as okay. It's like it. In fact, going the traditional route is now considered. I know it's like they may not use the word immoral, but it's still a sense of morality. You know,
to me it was like it seemed really romantic, you know, like that's the
it seems very unromantic though, because I mean, think about Valentine's Day. Like, how do you choose? Do you have how many boxes of chocolate do you have to buy? It seems like trouble. It's gonna be a lot of trouble.
sure
Romance.
but like the romantic part about it was like you're just going with how you feel in the moment, you know.
Yeah.
And that's really what's pushed right now. That's the morality, quote unquote, that's pushed right now.
Yeah.
Is like you need to follow your own emotions, you need to follow how you feel, you need to just like just let loose and like go with it, which is really different than what we were talking about at the very beginning of be firm in your principles and flexible in your expression. It sounds similar, it could sound similar to somebody, but it's very different, you know. And it's everybody right now is being persuaded and promoted to just go with their feelings and have no fucking principles. Like their only principle really is follow my feelings. That's it. And then everything else is just like, well, does it make me feel good? No. Like, hey, but we should feed children. But that doesn't make
But if you really look at it, even with the following your feelings thing, you don't end up doing anything fundamentally different than anybody else. I mean, like, meaning there's a system, it keeps you in a box, and then it says follow your feelings. So within this box, like, you feel like you're free because you're following these emotions, but the emotions are being directed by something else. So you're not, it's like, it's like, instead of me setting down a list of instructions of what I want you to do, I just program a set of feelings and experiences, and I present those to you. And then you go along with that, and you're thinking you're doing it of your own accord because it's inside of you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Versus if you were
Yeah.
reading that, you'd be like, oh, that's someone else telling me what to do. But if it's feelings, that's actually I'm doing it.
so
Right.
it's actually really fucking genius of the system. That's like the commander's intent of the system.
Mhm.
Right? It's just like this simple thing that you have to do is follow your feelings. That's the commander's intent. And then everything that you do in between there is like whatever.
If you read, well, not if you, I mean, as people read Heaven's Journey to Life, you look at the very beginning of it, talking about in the very beginning of existence, how we separated ourselves from ourselves. And that initial separation point, that's like that commander's intent. And that's what has rippled and reverberated out. And so all the feelings are coming back as the the ripple effect of that initial point. And so it just further separates us more and more and more. So it's not even the system is doing it. That's how it is now because it's become a system, but it's really us following that long enough that it's become systematized. And I mean, really look at it. Who systematized it?
We did.
Human beings.
We all did.
You might not think, well, I as an individual did it, but like as human beings, that's what we've done. We've systematized it. So we've done it to ourselves. And
Just-
yeah, go ahead.
Just a side note on reading Heaven's Journey to Life. There's value in reading it and then going back and rereading it
Oh,
as
yeah.
you're going through this process. And I'm just saying that because I was talking with someone who has had TT for a while, started reading Heaven's Journey to Life, Creation's Journey to Life years ago, and they couldn't read it. They couldn't read it at all, and they just gave up on it. But then recently they reached out to me and they were like, "Hey, I just on my own started reading it again, and I could actually read it and understand it. And before, I was literally pretending to read it because I couldn't like process the vocabulary. I thought it was just repeating the same thing over and over again. But now I see like, wow, this makes a lot of sense."
It's the whole point of them having TechnoTutor.
Exactly. And this person, they use their TechnoTutor the entire time.
Exactly. And you see the
They're
result.
able-
They come now. It's
Exactly.
like they can see things differently. I mean, it's the whole point of why it was created and why we do it.
Yes. Yeah. And so it's really cool, whether you're like starting out reading it and you think you get it or you don't think you get it, there's value in coming back after you like use your TechnoTutor for a while consistently. You come back and you're like, oh, I can understand even more. I can process even more. Just like you have more context to be able to go, oh, this actually makes sense and makes more sense. And I can see now even more so why this is so important, not just in my own life, but to share with other people. Yeah.
So, okay, this is really fascinating because we're talking about commander's intent and how each of us has a form of commander's intent. But did we actually decide that for ourselves, or is it just being put on us, right? So we're either going to just chase our feelings in our comfort zone, or you can have the intent within yourself of like, look, I actually want to take this on. Like, I want to do the process. I want to equalize myself as life, right? Perfect myself. And as you're doing that and having the let's say the intention of change, and let's say like Drake, this person that you're talking about, right? How they at some point started rereading the blogs. What I've seen is the kind of a commonality between the people who really take it on for real is there's like an intensity to desire to learn the material. And that's something where you can stimulate it in other people. But I see that a lot of it just comes from who you are, where like once it clicks and you're like, okay, I see how TechnoTutor is working. I see how there are these blogs, I see DIP, and you start putting it together. At some point, it's like this, at least for me, and it might just be my type A personality, but I'm like, I'm going to get through this thing. Like I
you also see the value in
really
it.
want to. Yeah.
I mean, I agree. There's like the discipline part that's supported within you, but like you see the value. And I mean,
yeah.
Imagine when we first met, if it was like, just start reading these blogs.
Not possible. Definitely not for me anyway. Definitely not for me.
Without TT, it wouldn't have happened. But when I had TT, it was like a week or two in. Yeah. Then you're like, hey, you should check these.
But I mean,
blogs.
what I'm saying, like, let's just take TechnoTutor out of the picture.
Oh yeah.
And like, that's what I'm trying to say. Like, if we just met and like, no, you got to read these blogs, and like you wouldn't even have had the context, and then it would have just been like, what the, and so you wouldn't have seen yourself the value.
It's so funny because yesterday we were bringing up the point of like coming into this process through TechnoTutor and then coming through Destiny, and like the type of person that you have to be one of those people. And it's funny because we were like, well, coming through Destiny, like, man, like if you really have had like, by that point, if you found Bernard, which Cameron, like I know for you, like you were searching, right, and found Bernard, and you're like, oh shit, like this makes sense. But you were on a search to find answers about like reality and all this kind of stuff.
I was
like,
suffering within myself.
Right.
Like,
so, but that's the type of person that it takes to get to that point and be receptive to something like Bernard.
Right. You have to be like at the bottom, basically. Yeah.
Right.
We kind of likened it to like you're jumping into the deep end of the pool there. It's like,
I was living in the deep end.
Right.
I was like, I had a homeless encampment in the deep end, and I was just living there.
There you go. There you go. The way I see like this point that you just brought up, Mitch, of like, okay, so there's, you're either you know, doing the commander's intent for the system, or you're making this choice. There's only two, like it's like that principle or that parable that Jesus talked about. You can only serve one master, right? You can't serve two masters. They have differing, like, hey, this is what one master wants you to do. It's complete opposite of what the other master wants you to do, right? And the point of that being, it's not like you're a slave, although that's how, I swear, people just want to be slaves. They're like, I am the slave of
Right.
God.
That's consciousness.
I want to
nowadays.
come back to that point. I know you're making a point, but I want to
Yeah.
come back to that slave
But-
thing.
Okay, but the point being, it's like you can only either follow the system or follow life, become life, right?
Tree
Express
of life,
life.
tree of evil.
Exactly.
It's right there.
There's only those two things. That's it. And to kind of really wrap this point, I love this quote that I heard. The most inspiring person is the one overcoming their fear of doing something, right? And this is like, I
agree with that.
realize, right? It's like, it makes so much sense, because if you really think about it, if you really look at it, it's like, why is that so inspiring for so many people? Like you watch a story, somebody's overcoming their fears of doing something. It's like you identify with that person. Why is that the case? Because everyone has fears, for one, and two, everyone recognizes those fears are not who they want to be, not them. That's the program that's running. And to overcome those fears is like that is, in essence, that is you breaking out of that program. That's you like seeing like, oh, okay, I don't have to participate in this particular program, this fear, whatever. And that's really like what we're laying out is the roadmap to how you can break out of all those fears and express as life. Like, what would you be doing if you had no fear? This is it right here. This is how you do it. This is how we get there for everyone. And that's really like, it's like, dude, okay, don't just let it be a story on the TV or in a movie or in a book that you read or a story that you play in your mind. Actually be a part of like being the person who's overcoming that fear. Be the hero in the story. Be the reality of what you actually want to be. Don't just like, play it out in your mind and like, oh, that sounds really nice. You can do that. That's what we're doing here. I know you wanted to make
that reminds me of the one-liner as well. It's that expression is more powerful than fear.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like when you really understand that, and I don't just mean for anyone who's newer listening to this, a lot of people think expression means emotion, but expression is a living act of who you are in any given moment. It's who you are as life. That's real expression. If you look at the word X and press, like express, X is out and press is like you're pressing, like when you press something, press your hands together, you're pressing out your being, life as who you are. And so, and that is, like we were saying, expression is more powerful than fear. It's one thing to see that intellectually and be like, oh yeah, and then you romanticize it and you go back to some movie you watch, oh yeah, express myself, it's better than fear. It's a whole other thing when you know that that's true. And when nothing can take that from you because it's who you are, you have proven it to yourself. And like I was reflecting on this just over the past few days, seeing how Self-Perfected has grown so much, seeing the level of conversation we have on the Hangouts. I mean, they started good. Now it's like a whole nother level. And I'm seeing all these people that, myself included, we were pre-programmed to just serve that master of feelings, emotions, comfort, thinking we weren't, because I remember watching The Matrix and you hear what's your command? Like, oh, I'm the divine creator of my reality. The whole time I'm not creating shit. Well, I'm just recreating.
Well, there's like a war and you're like, well, I'm not creating that. That's all those people focusing on what they don't want.
Cameron, I did a visualizing peace meditation and it's working. Okay. It just has to work itself out. Okay. and I was looking at this though, because on the Self-Perfected call with, however many people we had on there, I'm looking at all these different people where either I've met them or Drake has met them or Christine's met them or whatever, one of us has, and supported these people to take it on for themselves to really change. So it's almost like if you were to look at it on some deep level, it's like everyone has their own like trajectory points in the system. And then they find TT, they find self-perfected, they find the process. And now it's like all these different trajectories are all now, there's like now this coherent way that we're all starting to come together. Like Gaetan, he was a freaking janitor when I had first chatted with him. And he was like, yeah, I'm concerned. I got a kid on the way. Like my wife and I were like trying to make it work. I don't know what to do. I'm like, straight up, I want to help you so badly. But if you don't have TechnoTutor, I am not going to be able to help you. And sure enough, he put together the money. And now look, like 10 months later, he's like, I mean, he's a bit further than that now, but, and he's making great money. Like it's, and now his vision is way bigger. So anyway, I'm just sharing that because in this process, when you take this on as the tree of life, you'll notice part of the tree of life is share. And as you do that, now we're finding even more people that the system would have just gobbled up and spit out and been forgotten about. If you're really brutally self-honest about it, you'd see that. But now we're all coming together and really standing, and it's really exciting to see. And with the upcoming event, I mean, that's going to be talk about making a dent in the universe. Like that's actually how you do it.
Yeah, that event's going to be really cool. You know, I was looking at that point because you even kind of expanded a little bit on that point of like thinking you're not following something, you know what I mean? Like thinking that you're free. And I was listening to, I want to say it was Revenge of the Ego, because I know I listened to that the other day, but I don't remember if the point I was thinking of came from that, but I think it was. No, I can't remember exactly which audio this is from, but it was basically the point of like, maybe it wasn't Revenge of the Ego. Do you guys remember the point where he says like humans were meant, like almost like meant to be the slaves of reality, of like this existence? Meaning he was saying it in the context of, well, let me just break it down how I look at it.
Okay.
You look at an animal, okay, like a horse that has to draw a carriage or something, right? Okay.
I was going to say an echidna, but okay. A horse drawing a carriage. Sure. But a horse drawing a carriage, right? Like we put it to work, right? And, or any point where how we treat animals, right? And it's like, we have this justification, and you hear all the time, like sometimes it's a religious point, sometimes it's not really spoken as a religious point, it's just a point within people, right? But it's like, well, we have dominion over the animals. Like if you think about the way we think about animals, we think of them as our slaves. Sure.
You know, yeah. And that's part of the whole rhetoric around human slavery is like, we don't want to say this about these types of, about this person or this person who comes from this classification or group, because that would lead to them being dehumanized, and therefore the justification of those people being treated as less than human and therefore as slaves, just like we treat animals. That's the kind of logic of it, right?
Hey,
so I was just looking.
If you can tie this in there, or I will. The video that Avery sent of Jordan Peterson explaining about Moses in the desert. Mm-hmm. Did you watch that one? Mm-mm. No. Okay, I'll explain it when you're done.
Well, I was just gonna bring in the point of like how, okay, a couple of points. I was talking with Kay this morning, and she was mentioning this point about, we were just talking about the past and points that have come up. And she was talking about, because, you know, like, I know you, Christine, Jess, Katie, and some of the other women are leading the women's group, right? For those of you who don't know, I mean, probably if you're listening to this, you already know, but there's a women's group. There's qualifications to join, right? But you could always find out by texting Christine or Jess how to join that. But there's a lot of women in there now that are walking through the process of getting ready to give birth. They just gave birth, they have kids, and doing that process, right? And Katie was talking about how she had to walk through the point of like all of her feminism stuff when she had our first child, Max. And she said this point about feeling, there was this point where it's like she was walking through a point of feeling, I don't know if she used the word jealousy, but it was like a point kind of jealousy of like, because I had freedom still, and then she didn't. And that was like a point she had to walk through, right? And I was just looking at that of like how, and I was like, it just clicked, like boom, all the way back to feminism, the roots of that, the challenging of women being at home, like all of that like looking at the men, it's like you get to leave the house every day. You know, regardless of what you actually experience once you leave the house, you get to leave. But I have to be here with this little crying baby and just be at its totally at its beck and call and care for it like I am its slave.
Mhm.
Right. And I was just looking at that point, because then the point would be like, that's not cool to enslave women like that. But if you were actually just, if you didn't have any reaction to the idea of being a slave, and you actually were looking at what's best, wouldn't you be like, well, is it a slave? Is it not a slave? I don't care. I'm doing this because this is what's best for the baby. Okay. But if there was any doubt within you, or there was any sort of thoughts, or there was any, like, imagine someone can just insert a thought of like, hey, your husband, he just gets to go off and be with the boys and like hang out and go to work and like get on calls and go to lunch hour. And like, he doesn't have to, you know, you're a slave. Like, imagine that little thought comes in and the woman dwells on it, and it becomes this point where it's like, yeah, I'm not a slave. I want to be free. And then you can see how that over generations becomes this point of like,
Dude, that's the serpent.
yeah, but exactly. Well, yeah, but it's like not taking any responsibility at all for the actual.
And also thinking that it's your original idea to like break free, you know,
Again,
when it's
that's
now
that
this
commander's
mind
intent thing.
virus. Right.
Like,
Yeah.
we're just going to give you the little bit that we need you to like latch on. That's what the ego does. You listen to Revenge of the Ego, and it like talks about how like a thought or an experience is inserted. I've really been looking at this point of experience. And I remember there's this I don't know if it's an audio, it might be, but there's definitely a transcript of, it's called Principle versus Experience-Based Living. And I remember that that interview, whatever you want to call it, was one of the most, that one stuck out the most to me when it was released back in, I think it was like 2009 is when I first read it. And that was one that really stuck out to me. And I was just looking at all those points about like being a slave and so forth. And there's this game, and we've talked about this all the time. We were just talking about earlier, like there's this game we play within ourselves of like, because I'm going along with my feelings, that's me, I'm choosing, I'm not a slave. And then if I were to start making decisions based on principle, well, then I'm forced into a certain choice, and now I'm a slave. And it's like, if we look at what the definition of slavery, that is actually not best. Right? Like, what do we really mean when we talk about being a slave? We mean you're making someone else do something for you that you could do yourself. You're taking advantage of the fact that they're in a lesser position than you, and you're getting them to do it. And they are not, they're not allowed to have the same benefit you're having. I'm just trying to talk it out, but
yeah, in that context, it's like you're not considering anybody but yourself. You know, if you're the slave,
well, you might be
master,
considering your family or something. You know, you might be
but
considering.
you're not considering
your
who
racial
you're
group,
enslaving.
or-
You're not
right. You're not considering that.
enslaving.
You're. It's like you.
So here's where the
Imagine
Moses
an
thing ties
animal
in.
was like. Imagine an animal suddenly could just make you the slave and do all the
Yeah.
stuff that you're making them do. Wouldn't you be like, no, what the hell? No. But they're not allowed to have that opinion, that right, that feeling, and so forth.
Right.
And so when I was just looking at it, there's this reaction to the idea of slavery that comes up, even though when you look at the system, we have a debt-based system, everybody is a slave.
Yeah.
Even the ultra wealthy elite, they're still a slave to the system. They still can't go outside the bounds of it. And you see what happens when they try to, like the pushback and they can lose everything and all these kind of things. And it's like we all have enslaved ourselves to a system, and then we're all pretending like we're not slaves while we're just competing for survival. But then the solution to it all, to change it, requires us to do very specific things. You know what I mean? And change ourselves to be able to do it. And then we go, I'm not going to be a slave. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you always have this common thing with people, or we had it a lot early on within Destiny of like, well, you just want me to give up my emotions. Like, I'm not going to be a robot. Like, I, you know what I mean? You would just be a robot. And it's like, dude, honestly, the emotions are the most robotic thing that I can think of about myself. Like,
Really look at
it's,
it,
it's
yeah.
like, I feel like
Yeah.
a fucking robot when these surge of emotions come up and I can't do something because of it, or I have to do something. It's like, that's what a fucking robot. I mean, I know Drake, you're reading Asimov. Christine, I'm not sure if you're reading it too, right?
She's
Yeah.
actually further along than I
You're
am,
like,
yeah.
okay, yeah, I thought so. But like one of the things about the robots is like they can't do something, and they'll like they're not allowed to harm people. But there's certain situations where it's like they'll kind of have to they'll be forced into a situation. And then even if it was the right thing to do, they're so programmed with not harming human beings that it'll like shut their circuits down. Like it's like they just feel like it's like they're being harmed and killed because it's so against what they're allowed to do. So, and that's how emotions feel. Like they don't feel good. Like even positive emotions, there's real enjoyment. You know what I mean? But there's like this, I want to say artificial. It's just emotion, but it feels artificial compared to like just genuine, like, you know, when you're relaxed, you're enjoying something, you're just in the moment, you're not thinking, you're just being a part of whatever you're doing. It's like that go with the flow, but it's not. Yeah.
Well, or even times where it's like you're not necessarily like feeling relaxed. Like this morning, I had like 12 things I wanted to get done. And then Jess was out. I've been taking Aristotle now, and Jess is like taking care of the birds more. Because with me taking care of the birds, it's like food, water, I gotta go. and now with Jess, she's able to like spend time with them and like pet them and make sure that the coop is all nice and all that. And so
Mitch is like, you're still alive. It's all good. I'm out.
Yeah.
I totally know how you feel though. Like I had to walk through all that. I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's like, but I will find genuine enjoyment even when I'm in like the grind, let's say.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, because sometimes people are like, oh, finally I can relax. I can enjoy myself. But it's like, can you just find enjoyment like in any moment, even when it's hard?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, you're right. It isn't. Yeah, I shouldn't say it like it's just in those moments when you're relaxing. It's just hard for people to relate to, because most of what everybody does on a daily basis is doing stuff they don't want to do. So they're not doing it like from the point of purpose. So, and it's cool because you bring that up, because it's like, but when you do things with purpose, you can find the enjoyment in it, even in the struggle, the difficulty, the challenge, or just the, you know, doing the grind, like you said, you can still find that enjoyment because you know the purpose of what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been actually pushing that point within like the Hangouts, and then after the Hangouts on the TT call, just specifically the point of like how everyone's programmed to want to retire, you know, because their entire life is spent doing things they don't actually want to do.
Right.
And so they're just looking for some reprieve or some rest from that. And then what, die?
Dude, and then think about that. That is a program.
Yeah.
And I mean it in the sense of like that comes from the system. Okay, remember like we've talked about like the idea of like what diamond rings being engagement rings, but
right.
It wasn't always that way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so like the idea of retirement itself is an artificial thing. I don't know. I don't know the history exactly of when retirement came as a thing, but it's not, you know what I mean? It's not a real thing. It's an artificial thing to get people to invest in pension programs. You know what I mean? So that they'll eventually, so they don't question what they're doing the whole time. It's a whole scheme, you know?
You know who explains it really well, the whole retirement idea, is George Orwell in Animal Farm. Like he explains the idea really well of just like, yeah, you know, you're gonna like you said, the pension schemes, all that. It's like the animals are talking to each other, but you know, instead of sending you off to the slaughterhouse, what we're gonna do is we're gonna make sure that after you get into old age, you'll be able to rest. We'll take care of you, all this stuff, and then like they instead work the horse even more and then send them to the slaughterhouse, right? Turn them into glue. But I wanted to bring in this point of like Moses, right? Because what you were talking about, like slavery and all that, Jordan Peterson was really explaining this really well. And there were some points in there that I was like, man, it's so good just to recognize of how there was apparently a command from God to the Pharaoh, let my people go. And he says, it's not just let my people go. It's let my people go so that they may worship me in the desert, right? And it was really interesting because what he says is basically they leave Egypt, they leave the Pharaoh, whatever. They go out into the desert, and then all of these people are like, now what? Like they're complaining because like now we're in the desert. Now we don't know what we're supposed to be doing. We're just wandering around. And he was making the comparison of like today, like you're leaving a tyrant, right? You're leaving a tyrant, that slave master, for what? For you have to pass through the desert, and then there's another. Obviously, you're looking for freedom, but like there's a moment where you're kind of in this limbo of like being lost or whatever. And he was saying specifically with that story is all those people were slave class. And so now they don't have the ability or the understanding to create structure for themselves and all of that stuff. And so what they kept doing was going to Moses and being like, we have strife within ourselves, like because we're fighting amongst each other. There's a bunch of slaves. There's thousands, however many there were, of slaves, and Moses is now got to be the judge for all of them. And he's like, okay, well, all right, you're doing this, you're doing that. Here's what the remedy is going to be, and then people have to agree. Like, okay, that sounds fair. We'll do that, right? And he said, finally, somebody from outside the tribe comes in, and they talk to Moses, and they're like, look, dude, you can't keep doing this. You can't be the judge for everybody, because here's what's going to happen. One, it's not giving any responsibility for any of these people. And so they're not learning to develop themselves. And two, you're going to become the tyrant of all of these people, because that's just the position that you're putting yourself in, is like, now you're the new Pharaoh. And so what you actually have to do is support them to develop themselves. And I wanted to bring that in because it's like they were still serving, not Moses.
They programming.
They hadn't changed their programming. Exactly.
Yeah, they're still just acting in a slave mentality. So it's like,
right.
It's like if you were to start building a business, but then you're like expecting everyone to do everything for you. And it's like, in other words, you're still acting like in an employee mindset of just give me the task to do, and not like taking the full responsibility. And you can't if you haven't changed your programming. So that's a process. It's a process to do that. Like we all have to walk through this point, because how are you going to stand in a position of changing the system if you're still acting within the system as like an employee mindset? You will never change it. And then it's just like, I was thinking about this too, of people saying, because I had someone, I forget who it was, like asking me, oh, do you think there's going to be a certain point where it's just like too late? Like I could see they're participating in the fear of like, the WEF is going to do this and then it's going to be too late and all that kind of stuff, and it's like
that person participating in any of the self-perfected meetings?
Yeah.
Or is this someone totally?
No, but it wasn't like they were crazy going into it. It was just, they had, it's like, you can see when someone's like thinking about it, they're not possessed by it, but they're kind of like, it's like the beginning of that. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, and maybe they were just wanting to see what I thought about it, but I was just
like, that little whisper.
Yeah, exactly. They were getting a little whisper. And I was just like, looking at the point of like, there is no, it's too late. Like there is no, it's too late. It's just, how long do you want to suffer? How long do you want other people to suffer? Like, that's all it is. Like, so we're not, if we don't act, we will just continue to experience suffering. That's a fact. But we don't need to go into, well, at a certain point it's too late, because the only thing that does is cause you to not act, because it's the ego going, it's too late. Just give up. Just give up. It's too late anyways. What's the point? It's going to happen. It's inevitable. Like, just give up. So what's the point of participating in that? And then here's the question, is like, let's just say you realized it is too late. So then are you just going to give up? Or are you going to just keep pushing through? Like, do you want your life to just be one of resignation, or do you want it to be like, no, I'm going to keep going? Oh, I was going to say this earlier, because we were talking about that point of the retirement thing. There's this really cool book I read called The Stars, My Destination. And I don't know if you ever heard of it. I had heard of it. Just that name, that phrase sounded familiar to me. It's by Alfred Bester. And it's a really cool book. Like, I'll just give you the premise of it, just so if anyone wants to read it. But it's like this guy gets stranded on a ship that gets somehow destroyed, and he's just like kind of by himself on this like kind of like freight ship, like spaceship. And he's like stuck in a locker because that's the only place he can be where it's like he can have like an enclosed environment. It's just like a small, like, you know, locker that's not much bigger than like a small closet. And he's just in there trying to survive and trying to figure out a way to get back to Earth or something, right? And they introduced this really cool concept in the beginning called jaunting, where it's like you can, there was some guy who was a scientist doing some experiment, and then accident occurred. His lab caught on fire, and it was like he was about to be engulfed in flames, and he was yelling at his assistants, hey, grab the fire hydrant. It was like way across the other side of the room, like a big 50-foot room or whatever. He's like, he was gonna die. And then suddenly he found himself standing next to the fire hydrant, and then like they like helped, you know, they helped him recover and everything. And then they were like, he was like, what happened here? And then they figured out that he teleported. Okay. And it was just like, so then he spent the rest of his life trying to figure out how the fuck did I do that? And doing all these experiments on people, like getting volunteers and then experimenting, like they realized like, oh, it has to be like a moment, like you have no choice, like you're about to die kind of a thing. Right. So they would like drown people to the point where like they would get drowned, like trying to get them to do it, you know? And then finally they cracked the code of like what you have to do mentally. It's like an ability people had that was latent. And then it was really cool because the whole structure of society changes. You don't need cars anymore.
Yeah.
Because once you learn how to do it, there's certain rules. Like you can't jaunt somewhere you've never been, because you can't just imagine. You have to have a specific type of memory about the place you're going to. It's very specific, and you can only jaunt so far. So you can't jaunt from like here to Mars. It's too big of a distance, right?
Wait a minute. This sounds a lot like Nightcrawler from X-Men. he can only teleport 2 miles.
Oh, I didn't know that he could teleport. Okay.
Yeah. And it has to be like someplace that he's seen before or he's been before. Yeah.
And there's like certain rules. I don't remember all of them, but it was interesting because like rooms would not have doors anymore.
Okay.
It was like different things like that. Things that it was cool the way he looked at like how things would have changed. Cause like, and they had, instead of like a train station, they would have like jaunting pads, and it'd be like, people would be like popping in and out, you know, like almost like a train station. It's like there's certain places where, so you travel there, you're able to memorize it. And then that's a place that you have access to from now on, basically. Right. So people could go, like you could go, oh, I want to go to a meeting in LA, and you just go bump, bump, bump. And within like half a minute, you're there. So they didn't have telephones. Cause like you could just like, I could just show up at your house in a second and be like, hey, blah, blah, blah. And then like go right back to my house, like as quicker than I could pick up a phone. It's really cool. But that was just that's the selling point. If you want to read it, there's a lot more to it, but that's kind of a cool point. But there's this,
somebody shows up at your house. You're actually over at my house. And then they gotta wait for you. They're like, hey, so I mean, leave like a message.
Technicalities you just kind of look past, but it's like what's really interesting. I'll just share this point too. The really wealthy people, the more wealthy you are. In fact, if you're like one of like the, you know, like imagine like a Rothschild level, you know, like person or something, or like that, they don't jaunt ever. They never do it. They don't have to, because they could just ride in a car and they got all the time they want. So like the really wealthy people have like fucking horse-drawn carriages and shit. It's super weird. It's like if you're like kind of wealthy, you might have a car, but if you're super wealthy, it's like you have slaves like bearing you on like a, you know, like, because it's like totally unnecessary.
Yeah.
So like the more wealthy are, you do the most unnecessary thing. It's a really cool point just to, but there's this one part where the main character is searching for people, and it's a part of the plot of the book, and he's searching for these different people. And there's this one scene where he's looking for this person, and he goes to this, it's kind of like a religious cult sort of. And it's like, I think the guy's talking about a historical cult. I didn't actually look it up, but it was like a Russian cult that was like, or a sect. I don't know if it was a cult per se, but they should call it a sect, where they were all about getting rid of the pleasures of the body. Basically, they were like very ascetic, right? But in this book, it's like they had evolved that, you know, over hundreds of years or whatever it was, into like a form where literally, because they could do these surgeries on people where they could cut off all sensory experience, period. So it's like they would do something in your nervous system or your spinal cord or whatever they do. And so you would still be alive, you still breathe, and you would still be fed, but you literally couldn't experience, you couldn't hear, you couldn't feel, nothing. I think you could still think. I don't know. Yeah, I think if you read the book, like I think they could still think, but you couldn't feel anything, nothing, no outside input, no touch, no hearing, taste, sound, nothing. And it was a reason I thought about it is because you were talking about the Animal Farm thing.
Yeah.
About how they'll be like, oh, but instead of going to the slaughterhouse, they'll take care of you and all this stuff, right? And it was saying in the book, like the selling point of going into it. So like when someone's like interested in joining that sect, they would come and they would show them like the kind of monastery kind of a thing, right? And it'd be like these really nice, beautiful rooms, and like, like we will take care of you, and someone will bathe you every day and massage you, and like it's like this idea that you're going to be so taken care of and well fed and all this stuff, even though you're not going to experience it. It's like you'll be taken care of. But then in reality, once you join and they do all the stuff, they just set you on a little platform in total darkness and just leave you there, and they give you like gruel. And like no one touches you, like you're just sitting there. It's like they have like these rooms with just like people just sitting there doing, like laying there or whatever. I don't remember how they described it.
Yeah.
But it kind of made me think about that point of retirement, because like you see people who are retired, and it's like you've so much bought into just work, kind of enjoy little bits of things, your Christmas, your holidays. You can see how all of that plays into this whole thing of keeping that going.
I thought you were singing.
And then at the
Rihanna
end
there.
of that, huh?
I thought you were singing Rihanna there for a second.
I don't know what the reference is.
It's not another meme.
I didn't watch
It's just
Riri at the
about
Super Bowl,
Rihanna.
so I don't know.
That's
Yeah.
okay. That's okay.
Um,
The viewers will get it.
I saw this Architectural Digest random post on my Facebook, and it was like, we would expect nothing less of Riri, blah blah blah, at the Super Bowl. And it was like talking about how she rented some $87,000 a night mansion or something. Did you guys hear about this? It's just some random post I saw while she was doing the performance, like that's where she was staying or whatever. But anyway, it just made me think about that point of like retirement, of how you literally, by the time you get to it, you're basically brain dead. Like, I know lots of retired people, like, I have exposure to them. I know there's no exceptions. Like, they're all just like, they sit at home, they watch their Fox News or their CNN or their whatever TV. They go on like little trips here and there or whatever. They remodel their kitchen. But like, there's no substance left. There's no real enjoyment. It's just it's like there's a promise in the person's mind of, I'm going to work and then I'm going to be taken care of. But then you get to it and it's like, you have nothing left within you. Like, then you would think that's when you start to become creative. You would think that's when you start to like really do stuff and enjoy life for real. But instead it's like, let's just go eat at Cracker Barrel every Wednesday.
Yeah.
And then Saturdays we go and play bingo, or I don't know where the fuck, it just depends on the social class of the person, of what they do, but it's all the same, just monotony, really.
Yeah.
You're going to be able to, you'll see, and they're on a fixed income. So it's not like they're ever going to expand beyond something, and it's really sad. And it's kind of like, okay, the version of that's coming now for the future generations is this whole like being a single person, not married, maybe you have kids or maybe you don't, probably not. And you're just like watching your Netflix, doing nothing with your life, maybe going to a party or something, and until your 40s, 50s, whatever. Do you know what I mean? You can see like the evolution of this point, because they're selling everybody on the point of the freedom, not having kids and so forth, and having your life, but then what's the consequence later?
Yeah.
Because you don't want to be a slave. But look at what people end up being like. You can't live for 60. When do you retire? Like 65 or something, I think.
Yeah, 65.
You can't live a certain way until you're 65, and then suddenly it's just like the example with Moses in the desert.
Yeah.
Like you've lived your whole life in that. What I was thinking too while you were talking that Moses story?
What?
None of
You're
that is
thinking,
real.
I'm Moses. That's what.
No, I was thinking none of that is real.
I was also thinking that. That's interesting.
Because it's kind of like, well, no, I mean, historically, like there, that happened. And it's like, okay, so they really parted the Red Sea?
Well, I mean, if you actually look at the bottom of the ocean, you'll be able to find chariots, and there's
You know
been
what I mean?
stories like that. Yeah.
But then they can do the same fucking thing for the Muslim version
Right.
or the other version or the fucking Hindu version or whatever. Like, well, you know, if you look at it, there really is a turtle that the world is sitting on, and you're like,
So,
But,
okay.
I was just looking at that. I'm like, it's just, I'm not saying there's no value in the story that we can extract, but it's literally a story.
It's the same thing as the Greek mythology. Like, I don't see why people don't see that. It's like, it's literally the same thing as Greek mythology with all their gods, or Roman mythology, or Egyptian mythology, or, you know, however far back you want to go. It's literally the same thing, right? It's just stories, and the value of the story is understanding, oh, okay, this is how we look at, for instance, freedom. Freedom is not just freedom from a tyrant and, you know, to do whatever. It's, you're free from a tyrant. Now you have to take that responsibility. You have to develop yourself. You have to, it's not just, oh, we're free. And what
No
you go
one
into the,
uses that for that actual purpose. You
Right.
know, it's like a Disney movie where there's like maybe some cool point within it, but then
Peter Pan,
all the
Peter
other
Pan.
stuff is actually what's
Right.
the cool point in Peter Pan?
Peter Pan, the cool point is, today, that's the society that we have. We have men who grow up and never want to grow up. They're just boys. They're immature. They're stunted. It's Peter Pan syndrome, right? And so it's like, there's that cool point within it of like, look, this is what you're doing. You are stunting yourself, and you are just like, you want to party, you want to do this, but you never develop into a man. That's the cool point. What everybody gets from it is like Captain Hook and like flying and Neverland. It's like, I want to be Peter Pan. Like,
They literally get Peter Pan syndrome.
exactly, right. So it's funny because well, man, what was it that you were just saying about before the point of like Moses? I forgot. Whatever. I'll come back to it.
Retirement and
That book.
not having.
Oh, okay, retirement. Thanks. So, okay, with retirement, the crazy thing is, it's like, you can see where that leads to. Like, you can see it really clearly. Retirement leads to basic or the. Let me preface that. Before you get to retirement, the way that you're thinking is, I want to follow my feelings, and that leads people to, oh, retire early. Oh, the faster I can get to retirement, then boom, I'm there, right? But they're not considering, it's like, okay, what's the starting point in the first place? Like, begin with the end in mind, right? If you're beginning with the end in mind and you're just trying to retire, you're going to get to a place where you're not actually even living anymore. You're just like here eating gruel in that dark room, and you're just like, okay. But you were sold on this idea, right? And the one other thing I want to say before you go, Christine, is Mitch recommended this book. I think the guy's name is Dan Sullivan, but he's like 70 something years old, and he's like, I never want to retire. Like, I never want to retire. Why? Because this guy owns his own businesses. He's developing more and more. He's always expanding. He's like, I want to live till I'm 100 and something years old. And like, I just want to keep going, because what I'm expressing, what I'm doing, like, I get a lot of value from this. I never want to retire, you know? And that, if we weren't in this mentality of like doing things that we don't want to do and just going along with the system, and then with this idea of like, and one day I'm just going to follow my feelings, we wouldn't have this retirement mentality. What were you going to say?
And you got the whole religion. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, because I was looking up, because I thought I'd read like a statistic of like your chances of dying after retirement go up, basically. Like, so there is like a 25% of people after they retire end up dying, approximately. So it's like, once you,
Do you mean,
so it's,
what do you mean by that? Like as in
like your
shortly
life,
after they retire?
yeah, like their life expectancy like starts to just like decrease after they retire. So the chances of you actually living 20 years after you retire like is much
I'm sure
less.
that's built into a lot of the
Oh, for sure, 100%.
You know?
And it's more common in men than in women. You know, like you'll
Mhm.
have more incidences of death like after retirement. And it's just funny because you can see that, like I remember seeing that with people's parents, like as they retire, it was like once they didn't have to go to work, it was like, now what do I do with my life? You know, there was like a complete loss of like sense of direction and like,
Complete
well,
loss of
you know,
purpose.
right. And it's like, it's pretty sad because it's like some of them will start doing projects or they'll start occupying their time with something. But a lot of them, it's just like you said, like that monotonous of like, oh, we do this on Mondays and we do this on Wednesdays and watch. And really, it's like most of the time, what are they doing? Watching TV and like lying down, you know? So it's like by the time you're 65, if you haven't actually even taken care of yourself, which most people don't, it's like the quality of life that you're living at that age is also like very low because you just don't have the energy. You don't have any like, you know, and if like you didn't save enough money, it's like the chances of you even going to like somewhere like Florida to retire is not that high. You know what I mean? Where you can actually maybe like enjoy yourself a little bit or something.
And
So
I know what you're gonna say next, Cam. It's like because they call Florida heaven's waiting room, right? and it's like literally, okay, you're programmed with this idea of religion where you will eventually retire from this life and live in heaven, right? It's like it's so fucking insidious from the very beginning, where it's just all this idea. And that's not to say that there's no value in the stories that you're given, what we just said earlier, right? But like the way that we're all taught and the way that we all perceive it is just like, and then you retire and live in heaven, and that's it. And that's all I'm living for is just like that moment. And it was so funny because as Christine was talking, I was like, I know what I want to talk about today. But it's
Finally.
So thanks for waiting, guys. Now we're gonna
An
get to
hour
the
and a half
Welcome to
in.
the podcast. We're
welcome. This is basically how every podcast goes. It's like, okay, all right, I got it now. I got it, guys. Here we go. But okay, consider this. Is I was just thinking about people that I know who are retiring and things like that. And you know, in the past, maybe you could have gotten away with it. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe for like the first few people that retired, it's like, yeah, they were taken care of to some extent, I guess. But it was obviously like just a big Ponzi scheme where, okay, at some point, this pyramid, the fat part of the pyramid, which is all these people who are supporting it, they're going to get to the top and we're not going to be able to support that, right? Especially with the way that we do our birth rates here and everything. But even more so is the point that were just kind of expecting things to go and progress, and I'm putting that in quotes, right? Progress along, and things would just progressively get better, right? But what we're seeing really clearly, if you have eyeballs that work, you're seeing that we are not getting better in any sense. In fact, somebody was just over, we had our clubhouse yesterday, somebody was over and they were saying how they went to some store, went to the register, and the lady was like, yeah, it's $5.66. They gave him a $5 bill, 2 quarters, a dime, a nickel, a penny. And the woman took the 5 and she looks at the change and she goes, what is that? Like literally, what is that? And she's like, that's 2 quarters, that's 50. A dime, 60, 65, 66.
like, what is it, like the amount?
Yeah.
Or like what is it like? Not like
I think-
what are those coins?
Like what is
It
that?
sounded
what
like
is
one of
that
those
about?
coins.
but anyway, he said the manager had to come over. The manager had to come over and help her out. And the entire time he was thinking to himself, and he's an older gentleman, he was thinking to himself, he was like, wow, okay, kid, like he said this person had to be 18, 19. He's like,
Okay.
he's like, the kids today or the young adults today can't even count change. They can't even count, they don't even recognize it. And that's 18, 19. Imagine those kids who are younger, they're definitely not getting it. And he said the other thing was that when the manager came over or whatever and helped out, he said there's another thing that he noticed was, so she's not able to give change. She's not able to like understand how this works. How is she supposed to count her money? How are they supposed to, like, I don't know, do anything of importance? Like, how are they supposed to think critically at all if this is where they're at?
But I mean,
Right.
do they need, I mean, in the context of how the system looks at it, it's like, do they need to? I mean, just go to work, you'll get your paycheck. They're going to take care of all that stuff because you're an employee. And, you know, then just whatever money you have, you should buy food with it and get your Netflix and your Spotify. And
Right. Right.
What
When
else?
it says
Yeah, what
zero, go back to work.
I mean, like the system doesn't care. It's like,
But
Don't get me
that is
started.
essentially that is the life that people are going to right now, is the end of retirement. That's where they're like jumping into the end of retirement. And
but you still got
Um,
to work.
but you still have to work. You still have to work, but you get
You have to work for your gruel.
your life is as exciting as retirement, where you're just like doing the monotonous bullshit every day. You just watch Netflix, lie down, you get up, you lie down, you know, you go play bingo night, whatever. You don't even go to bingo night because, you know, social distance.
No,
People
you
still-
just
just
watch
play
people
bingo
playing
on your
bingo.
phone.
No, you watch people playing bingo on Twitch.
there you go. You watch people play bingo. And
There's
you
like a
feel-
live streamer who's like playing bingo. I'm sure that exists.
That's so
That's hilarious.
That
That's
would be
hilarious. Right? But okay,
Wow.
but those people who, you know, who are older, who were looking at those things, they were thinking, by the time these kids grow up, they'll be smarter, they'll be way ahead, they'll do all these other things. That is not the case. That's not happening at all, right? And it's because people have this idea in their mind that, first of all, they want to retire, they want to go to heaven, they want to do all this stuff. But it's like, someone said this the other day. I think it was yesterday. They said, everybody wants the spiritual awakening, but nobody wants to do the dishes, right? Which is kind of like, those two things don't really go, but they were making the point of like, everybody wants to do, like, they want to have the experience of like, oh, I did, you know, I'm enlightened or whatever, or maybe I did some ayahuasca or whatever, like whatever the case is. But then they don't want to do the actual work of just cleaning up after themselves, of just doing their own dishes, of just making the place nice. And it's like, the way I see it, we talk about this all the fucking time. Everybody wants love, but nobody wants to make sure that everybody has the education that they need, that everybody's fed nutritious food, that everybody's healthy, that everybody has clean sanitation, that we all have equal right to life. Nobody wants to do the work for that. They want the idea of it sounds really nice, but they don't want to work towards it. And I don't actually believe that they don't want to work towards it. It's just what we were just talking about, as far as the programs that they're running are just so strong, and they're fighting. Many of them are fighting to get out of it. Many of them are stuck, you know.
Well, this comes back to that like intensity point. I'm still trying to figure out what that intensity is, but okay, an example here is one of the first things that ever got me on this journey was when I met y'all. Well, not See God. See God wasn't in the picture at that point. Well, she was
I
there,
didn't
but
exist.
she was there in spirit. And we were in Denver, and this was like in whoever's suite it was. I don't know if it was Cameron's or Avery's suite. And I had just seen a TT presentation. It was my first chance to interact with Max. I remember my mind just being blown by chatting with Max. And I went up to Cameron and I was like, is this real? Like, is your kid just one of those special kids, or like, what is this? Because I want to have kids that are like Max. Like, I see where the world's headed. This makes sense to me. I'm not going to not have genius kids. Like, I want to know how you do this. And the first thing Cameron said is, he's like, okay, so Max is not special. This is what should be normal for a 3-year-old, 4-year-old, or whatever. I'm like, okay, cool. Makes sense. So I was like, so how do I do this? You're like, okay, so you want kids, right? And like, I'm like, yes, I want kids. And then Cameron goes, okay, well, that starts now. Doesn't start when your girlfriend gets pregnant or your wife gets pregnant. It starts right now, because you're programming all the shit in your mind of how you think the world works is going to get passed on to your kids if you don't walk this process now. And for me at that point, it was clear enough and I have this like intensity to want to grow. So I was like, yep, okay, I'll do it. What's the next step? And then especially when I had TechnoTutor as well, you guys are like, yeah, just do it every day. Do it every day, read these blogs, do the thing. And I took it on. I just took it on. And so
Mitchell gets it. He got exactly what I was trying to say. It was perfect.
well, and it's like, that's what I see as a really cool point for Self-Perfected is we're a community of equals and of people from all different walks of life, from all different backgrounds. I mean, we got people from South Africa, Morocco, Germany, Paraguay, Australia, US, Canada, right? And we all have a different point to play, obviously, right? No two people are exactly the same, but it's the same process. And I've just seen that I don't know, what do you guys think that is, that like desire within people or that intensity? Like, I think everyone has it. It's a spark of life in everybody. But for some people, it's just so damn suppressed, that they think retirement is better than process.
Okay. So from the guy that I was telling you about before, he was talking about reading the blogs, right? He was saying he was reading one of the blogs and it was talking about rebirth. And as he was reading it, he had the cognition of, oh, this isn't just rebirth of like me, my personality being reborn here on this planet, but rebirth of me as life, like rebirth of me, like this is another, that's me in another life, as in like, and it made me think of this. It's like having all these nerve endings, we have all these nerve endings.
Is this pre-severing of the nerve endings or
this is pre-severing of the nerve endings?
Just making sure.
But we have all these nerve endings, and what is the purpose of the nerve endings? It's like to tell you when you've touched something that's too hot, to remove your hand, right? And oh, this is soft, or this is, this is hard, this is cutting, this is whatever, whatever it is. And so that all of this hand, all of this body can work in unison, right? Right now, it's as if every nerve ending has its own brain, and it's going like, well, but it's just me. It's only me. And yeah, I see all the other nerve endings, but it's only me. But we are actually, all of us as individuals, we're nerve endings in a sense of life. Does that make sense? It's like
Yeah.
That's
Should be pretty obvious.
right. But like it's so challenging because people really identify, and here's the thing, people really identify with their personalities, their characters, their fears, their whatever, right? Cam, I see you like,
I know, it's good.
right? Right? It's like that's it. It's like, okay. Man, what needs to be recognized is the commander's intent here is you're a nerve ending for life, right? You are an expression of life. But it's all of us together. We have to but you have to understand. You have to study destiny. You have to use technology. You have to, in order to be able to actually work uniformly together, you need these things, because otherwise
because the intellectual piece is not enough. That's why you got these armchair philosophers and these people, they're just stuck in the mind. But 99% is automated. That's the part that's got to change. That's what's Destiny and TechnoTutor, the automated piece.
Yes, the automated piece needs to change. Yeah. And what most people think of as intellectual, and I'm putting that in quotes, like the intellectual piece is really just like looking good in the system. It's just like
Jordan Peterson.
Yeah. He's really intellectual.
But,
right.
No real practicality.
Right. It doesn't, in the greater sense of things, it's like, what is the value of just having good stories? Like, who cares? Like, who are you serving? Are you serving the system, or are you serving life? That's really what it comes down to. And so like, you can be the most intellectual, but if like, it's the same argument that Christians make for Lucifer, right? It's like, oh, he's so beautiful and intelligent and everything. It's just that he's, he thinks he's greater than God. That's the problem. Like, that is the problem with all of society, is everyone is so intellectual and smart and whatever, but it's for what? For the system? Like, come on.
Yeah, literally.
Come on.
Literally.
Right?
You're
Like,
nerve ending for the system of abuse.
right.
Nerve ending for life.
For the system of abuse, exactly.
So, okay. So what is, the word that keeps coming back to for me is like this intensity of a desire to shift. And it looks different in different people, different expressions, all that.
Yeah, break that
However,
down. Break that down. The intensity for the desire to.
So it's like when I wake up, and then because I've engineered my environment in a specific way, and I have certain, let's say, personality traits. Like, I grew up in, my dad very much, it's like very logical, very like go, go, go. Same with my mom, kind of. But it's like they had an intensity just for the system, right? They're retired or retiring. And they knew nothing else really until a couple of years ago. I introduced them to all this stuff. But within myself, like the intensity, I see it every day in the fact that I read the blogs every single day. I have my techno tutor for usually an hour every single day. The way I approach Jess is also very intense. You can just see it in her personality and her everything, right? It's like we just have a really deep freaking desire to move and change and influence and learn and all of that. And it's just, I suppose another way of looking at that intensity is a very sincere and urgent way of taking action every day.
And
And other people
responsibility.
might have the intensity to understand too. It just looks different, but I'm just wondering what that is. If it's like your being hasn't had so much suppression, or I know it's increased too since I've been doing the process. It's like how we talk about resubstantiating yourself.
Yeah.
And as you do this process and you clean up the words and you get rid of the baggage, more of you comes through, like in every moment. It's like the real you, you know?
I think it's just a logical conclusion of really understanding what we are here to do, and having that it's not just even like a desire. It's just like, it's the understanding, it's the expression of that understanding more and more effectively, where it's just like, because you guys are always expanding. And like, it's funny watching you guys sometimes, because like you're always talking about expanding, even after you just had like a major extension. You're like, and we're here. It's kind of, things are going slow, and everyone else is like, slow. What the hell? But it's like it's the logical expression of the understanding of what we're here to do, because we're not here to play small. We're not here to be slow or do things in a way that other people find acceptable or whatever. It's like we're here sharing life and expressing life. We are life, sharing life, creating a world that's best for all. And it's like, you guys are at the place where it's like, it's cool. What's really cool about it is you're at the place where you're expressing that the way that you are right now. And it seems really intense for a lot of people, because they're not there yet, right? But as we get more and more people doing this, that will just seem like, oh yeah, that's normal. That's what everybody's doing,
Yeah. And taking responsibility, like really, because when I came into this as well, like I had a similar, like you, Mitch, it was like, oh, this makes sense. But now what do I have to do to like give up all the bullshit that I've been programmed with, that I've accepted, that I've, come to think as reality? Because I got sucked into like all the spirituality stuff, where you come to this like fake realization, really is what it is, of like how you create reality, and working through all your traumas and your past and whatever it is that's like holding you back. But it's like, you don't have the full context. So then all you do then is focus on being positive and being, or especially with like Jen, when you're listening to Jen, it's like feeling good now. It's like that becomes your primary purpose, but you're not actually changing anything physically in your life or within you actually. So it's like also realizing, so the responsibility is like, because you see it happens when people fall within this process. It's like not willing to take responsibility for the stuff that's, because walking this process is not easy. It's not it's not sunshine and rainbows and like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna like walk through all my fears and challenge all the things that I've come to accept and allow that like my parents programmed in me and what generationally has been programmed within me and what the system has now also programmed within me of like school and my friends and all that kind of stuff. So it's like, there has to be a point where you're like, I'm willing to do whatever it takes, because Drake actually asked a really good question yesterday at the clubhouse. It was like, what is it worth to you to be 100% certain? And he just kind of left it at that. It was like, just
In your
be
life.
certain.
100%
Okay, in
certain
your
in
life.
your life.
I don't know. It sounded like you just cut it off at certain, but okay, in your life.
Okay, so maybe I did.
And everyone kind of was like, well, do you mean like monetarily? Do you mean like, like, what do you mean worth it? And for me, it was just like obvious. It was like, no, I'm willing to like give up my entire life to be 100% certain on, we need to change the fucking system. And this is how you do it. Because now that we're having a baby, and I'm like, I'm bringing my child into this world. It's like, fuck, like things really need to change, because if, looking at like the influences of like what people are being exposed to, and like, we were just talking to someone yesterday that works in the school system in Canada, and it's actually so fucked what she has to accept. We were like, man, like the things that people are willing to do for a paycheck now, it's crazy, because she's like tutoring kids in class that like, now she's like, I have to be careful with what I say and how I address this person. And like, I have to come, oblige to their pronouns and how they want to be identified and all this kind of stuff. And it's, me and Drake were talking after, and we're like, literally, it's so blatantly obvious to us of like contributing to just the abuse of children. But it's like, when you're in that survival point, it's like, what are you willing to stand up for? There's no, like, you're not even on like a morality scale anymore. You're just like, no, I just need this paycheck to survive, So I think the responsibility, it's like, how much responsibility are you actually willing to take, and to just challenge your beliefs? Because that's what another thing that it comes up a lot is like, well, now you're telling me to like, I don't, like, for a woman, for example, because I can speak from that perspective. It's like giving up, like not running my own business, for example, because that's what I was doing before. It's like, that is like a huge point, because it's like you're programmed with this like strong, independent woman type of thing. I can't rely on anybody else but myself. I need to make my own money. I need to, in the case that like something happens with my future partner, if they leave me, like I can't be left with nothing. You know what I mean? But it was all out of reaction to like all the shit that women have been through, in a certain sense of like, I can't rely on anybody. I can't trust anybody. But then when I got introduced to Self-Perfected, it was like, oh, you can have agreements and principles and like lay the shit out right from the get-go. Okay, great. Now I don't have to worry about this stuff, and I can actually find a partner that I can trust, and we can actually build a real life together. And I can actually get all the things that I want in an even better sense. And I know now that like the long-term goal and the long-term vision of this is not only bettering my life, but I'm actually making a world that's toward like that. The intention is to create a world that's best. And I get to do that within my own life on the micro scale. And then also with what we're doing with the business, it's like we're taking care of the macro as well. So anyway, so it's just cool because I can see like with you and Jess, it's like very obvious. And for us, it seems kind of obvious because it's like we just kind of jumped into it and it was like, okay, yeah, let's fucking do this. But it's like, now how do we share that with other people to like realize that for themselves? And that, obviously it's like, we're not going to get to every single person, but it's like, for those that can hear this message right now, it's like, what are you willing to do? What are you willing to, that's the simple principles of Jin. What are you willing to do? What are you willing to give up to actually like get the things that you want? And that's where like people get really stuck and their teachability goes down.
You know what I just realized is that there are a lot of people who their bodies, they like, I don't know, they'll tweak something in their back or whatever, right? And they'll experience a lot of pain from their nerves, right? And then they can go and deaden those nerves, right? But like the whole purpose of the nerve is to tell you like, hey, this isn't going right. We need to change these things, right? But we're moving into a society where virtually the vast majority of people are becoming deadened nerves, right? They're becoming more and more deadened, giving less and less of I would say constructive feedback to the body. Less and less they're being a part of actually creating life, and less ability to see for themselves. But this is the point that I'm really trying to say, is people have less and less ability to see this for themselves. And this is why it's so important what we're doing, what we're sharing, because it's like, trust me, I was not fucking here 5 years ago, 6 years ago. I was not at this understanding of myself, of life, of relationships, of just all the things that I actually want. All the things I actually want. Because to me, I wanted to have kids, but that was not fucking happening. That was not, I was telling Kim, I was like, I'm gonna have a kid with some chick and I'm just gonna raise it on my own, because there's no way I can make a relationship work out with a woman. They're all crazy. They're all fucking crazy. So I'm just gonna have to do this on my own. And at that point, I'd never had a relationship that lasted more than 3 months, you know? And you know, aside from that, it was like the way I was thinking was this spirituality type of thing of just like, you know, go with the flow, whatever happens, happens. It's all good. You know, I'm creating my own reality. Meanwhile, like that kid who died over there, who cares? Like, it has nothing to do with me. Like, I'm not going to participate in feeling bad about that or anything like that, because, you know, I'm just going to feel like I'm going to create the life that I want, whatever that means. And so things will work out for me, and everything else, everybody else, fuck them. You know, they'll be okay, whatever, they'll figure it out. And, you know, it's really just, that's where I was at. And mind you, I was broke. Again, no relationships or very poor relationships. But I still wanted kids. I still wanted like to live a good life, to, you know, have things that I enjoyed. I still wanted to enjoy life. And it was really like, as I started walking this process and really, man, this is so good, so good. I want to say this before Mitch has to leave, right? Before we all have to leave, right? But this is so good, because we were talking about, you know, how people will look at us just like they look at like the Illuminati or whatever, and like they'll be like, oh, you know, they're doing some sort of magic, some weird, like they've made some. I was talking with, I think it was with my mom. I was talking about this, about how I was talking with my mom how in the future we're all going to have kids. Well, we are all in the process of raising kids who are going to be so genius, where they don't have to walk through necessarily the same fears that we had or that other people will have. And that's not to say they're not going to have any fears, or they're going to be absolutely like just perfect, but they're going to move through life so much easier than the average person. Like the way that they're going to flow through life, it's just going to look like to other people, especially the kids that are growing up at the same time who don't have these tools. It's going to look like, fuck, like just life just bends or reality bends towards them. Like they know what the fuck they're doing. That's what it's going to look like to people. That's how they're going to describe it, right? And my mom was like, and then people are going to think like they did a deal with the devil or something. And I'm like, I guess, but that's how people look at the Illuminati, or like, you know, people, how they look at, you know, the Freemasons or the Brotherhood, whatever, any of those clubs. That's how they look at those people. And what do people think about that? They actually are very jealous of them. They actually wish that they could be a part of that. They wish they could get a letter from the Illuminati saying like, hey, join us or whatever. But regardless, it's like they think of it as some sort of magic, like you did something magical to get this or whatever. But the reality is we literally just dedicated ourselves to this purpose, and every day just use our techno-tutor. And that's really like
The magic of TechnoTutor.
that's it. That's it. And like when people see,
Yes, we did some spells.
yeah, exactly. We did some spells.
The
When
kids were
people
doing
see,
spells every day.
when people see like what actually goes into creating these type of children and our community and everything, and people are like, oh, those techno tutor people, they're doing some sort of magic. But when they actually see it firsthand, they go, oh, it's that, like you actually just put in the work.
Yeah.
And this is what it looks like. And it's not like some crazy, like complicated bullshit, whatever. It's like, it's just this simple work and dedication. It's not like some crazy, like complicated bullshit, whatever. Hey, Christine, we can hear that.
No, my bad.
Dude, I just had the weirdest deja
Ooh.
vu. Did you guys have? I just had real deja
Oh,
vu.
they're changing the matrix. They're changing the matrix. Right. But
Christine liked it so much, she's like, I gotta watch the replay right now.
gotta play it twice. Right. But in essence, right, it's like the point being made is that when you see how simple it is, it's like, oh, I can do this and I should do this, and I can see the logical conclusion of this. I want to be a part of it. And so
And I'm seeing all these parents now and kids. And I remember in the beginning, it's like, well, where are all the other kids that are doing it? And it's like, you come into like the parenting groups and self-reflect and everything, and you see all these other kids, and it's like really cool. And you're starting to see the ones who did it from the beginning at the very young age starting to show those results. And it's like, I mean, I can predict exactly when it's going to happen. You can see it. It's really cool.
yeah. So it's never too late to start, but there's no reason to put it off. There's like, you should never put it off. Okay. You want to wrap it there?
Wrap it.
All right. I think that was great. That was
It's
great.
a wrap.
It's a wrap. Put a nice little bow on it. You guys already know all the things. We have an event coming up June 2nd through June 4th. If you're listening to this before then and you haven't gotten your ticket, what the fuck are you waiting for? Come on. Come on. We're going to have a lot of
You better
fun.
hurry.
Think about this. Think about this. Are you going to be the kind of person that goes, yeah, I know I have this whole program of like procrastinating to the last minute to do shit, and you're just accept that? Or you can say, hey, look, this is a decision for me to show this new way of being, this new way that I can correct myself, and just get the ticket right now. And don't play that bullshit game. Wait till the last minute and
The
just
event is the gift for
start
you to
deciding
walk through that
today.
programming.
You might get a cool
Exactly.
t-shirt.
yeah.
Probably.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
All
Wink,
right.
wink.
So we'll see you guys next week.
On Rumble as well.
On
Potentially,
Rumble.
you'll see us next week on YouTube. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll find out if they'll allow us to upload. But yeah, have
Put
a
in the
great one.
comments what you think the podcast should be called, the episode.
Oh yeah. Give us some ideas.
I
Yeah.
already
Yeah.
know what it's going to be called, but yeah.
Compete
All
with
right.
Cameron's title.
See you guys. Bye.
Okay, bye.
Right.